Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jay Shepard here, sitting in for Robert Chernin, who is out saving the world somewhere. Fortunately for everyone, Ericka Redic is here with me. And today we're going to have some interesting conversations, I hope. And we're going to have a little bit of banter back and forth about a bunch of things that you may or may not already know. And one of the big things that's happening, and it was brought out even stronger yesterday when President Biden is making his speeches trying to raise some more money. And one thing he keeps bringing up is the Supreme Court. So he believes that, or at least he's telling people, I'm not sure what he believes actually, or actually what he thinks, or if he does think, but he talked about how there's an opportunity at the Supreme Court of 2 vacancies coming up in the next 4 years, and how if he is not in charge, we could have more conservative justices like we've had the 4 that President Trump was able to bring onto the court. So one of the things, it's 3, I should say, and one of the real important things here is that the court is making some major decisions, and they're not living on precedent. And I think you've seen it so far. You know, they've decided some major cases so far. You know, some of them have been unanimous decisions, you know, regarding President Trump being on the ballot and maintaining access to abortion pills. But some of them are 6-3 votes. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that. One of the 6-3 votes was redistricting in South Carolina. But one of the big ones was the bump stock gun bill. But there's more to come. There's still another 20 cases that haven't been decided. And some of them you're probably very familiar with. And whether, you know, Mr. Trump will face trial on charges that he's tried to subvert the 2020 elections. There's also the January 6th question, prosecuting under the federal obstruction law. And we'll get into a little bit more of that. And then there are some more states where we're talking about abortion. There's another ruling coming up. There's another gun case coming up about restraining orders and domestic violence and disarming the American people. There's also big talk about what they're going to do about social media platforms. There's also some little interesting things. You know, one of the cases that they're talking about is whether homeless people have the right to public property and whether they can take over and whether local jurisdictions have any thoughts about that. But one of the things that it's really important to me is 3 cases that are coming up. And those cases revolve around administrative decisions that are made by agencies of the federal government and not laws. So I want to bring on our co-host, the real talent on this show, Ericka Redic. So it's great to have her on. She's going to be actually carrying the load here and keeping me on target, on task. And hopefully we'll have some fun and discuss some of the things.
Yes.
So one of the ones I wanted to talk to, and I want to make sure we understand what it really means, is the bump stock case. So it was a 6-3 ruling. The conservative justices said that the ATF went too far in determining that the bump stocks could turn a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic machine gun.
Yep.
So any thoughts on that, Ericka? What you're a strong Second Amendment supporter. Are they machine guns?
You know, Jay, here's the deal. I'm kind of a gun nut, so my take is even if they made them machine guns, I don't see why the ATF gets to regulate that. But I know I'm probably in the minority. Maybe I'm too much of a gun nut, but I think I'm glad to see this get overturned. Because do you remember, was it last year in Congress? They were trying to say that things like arm braces were bump stocks now. And they basically were trying to ban everything and anything that they could possibly construe as assisting someone in firing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is there was a 1934 law that in the United States we banned machine guns. And the definition of a machine gun is you pull the trigger once and multiple rounds
bullets
are delivered.
Right.
So when they sat down and they looked at this, the 3 liberal justices, typical in their fashion when they ruled on abortion cases and those kind of things, are pure science deniers. The evidence was very, very clear. when you look at these guns with the bump stocks, they allow you to shoot faster, but each bullet is distributed with one pull of the trigger. So
That's
even
right.
though this evidence was there, they decided to deny the science again, which is so typical of these liberals. I mean, they don't believe that a baby is a baby. They don't believe it's a human being. They're denying the science.
You know, our Supreme Court justices are not biologists, Jay. How can they possibly determine what human beings are?
Right. So again, you know, we've got these people that are coming in. The role of the Supreme Court is pretty simple. Look at the laws, decide whether or not they're constitutional, whether they pass muster. Their job is, they're not the president, they're not the executive branch.
That's right.
They're not the legislative branch. They don't create laws.
That's
what
right.
do they do? They interpret the laws that are on the books. And obviously, they might follow the science occasionally. At least the conservative justices do. But there is no way these liberal justices wanted to look at the science, wanted to look at the evidence, fact-based. And so they go on and make up their own stories.
That's right. What is it, Jay? Isn't there a word for it when you have an outcome that you're trying to get and you like back, maneuver the evidence? Isn't there a word for that? They seem to do that a lot on the left.
They do. It's confirmation bias is what they're doing. So they already have their decisions made. And so they're just looking for something, anything that can reinforce it. And if they can't find it, what do?
Make it up.
Make it up. So here we are, the liberals, let's make it up. So at some point...
This is why we lose, Jay, okay? We're too honest, okay? We're too integrous and just for politics. If we could just be smarmy, slimy people, maybe we would understand things better.
Well, you know, most humans have their own fantasies. I mean, everybody has a little fantasy of some sort. My fantasy, I'm going to be very clear and very open with it, was to play basketball for the Boston Celtics. Okay, that was my fantasy. I know you may have different fantasies. Maybe I don't want to hear them. But
no, I wanted to be president of the United States.
Well, you still have an opportunity.
Yep. Well, okay. Maybe.
You know, there's opportunity out there. There's a saying that anyone can become president, and Joe Biden is a living example of that.
Proof.
That it takes nothing at all. So you got a shot there, Ericka.
Hey, if Joe Biden can do it, I can do it. Well,
unfortunately, he can't do it. He can get elected. That doesn't mean he can be president. and there's a real this area of distinguishing. Just wow, I'm just talking like that. Wow, but I have an excuse. This is my first day with the new tongue, so I'm trying to work this out and figure this out. So bear with us on this. But I want to get back to a little bit about what the whole bump stock thing is really all about.
Yeah,
and what it is really about is that agencies within the government make the rules. That the Congress has been so poor in their writing of laws that they can be interpreted in a variety of different ways. So one of the big cases that is coming through, it's actually 3 cases built into one. And it goes back to what they call the Chevron deference.
Oh, Jay.
And for those who might not be totally familiar with the Chevron deference, it's a 1984 ruling that the Supreme Court made.
Yes.
And what they said is that judges have to defer to agencies for a reasonable interpretation of ambiguous statutes. So what they're saying is that these unelected officials within the government make judicial decisions.
That's right.
Instead of judges.
That's right.
So what we're doing is we're providing this power to people that come and go within the government, people who aren't elected. Every 4 years, we know they bring in new heads of agencies. Every time there's a new president, they bring in people that will interpret rules and regulations, that have the ability to make judges defer and take on these, allowing these administrative, bureaucratic advocates to make the law.
It is like permission for the administrative state, essentially. So when we're on the show all the time and we talk about the administrative state or the deep state or the fourth unelected branch of government, this is kind of like, isn't this basically like the justification for it almost?
It really is. And if you go back, Neil Gorsuch, you know the thing I'm saying, like Biden.
You know the thing.
You know the thing. You know,
Neil Gorsuch.
That's him. Justice, Supreme Court justice. Wrote a book before he became a Supreme Court justice. Oh. And he took on the administrative state. He talked about it's a really difficult book to read for someone like me because there's a lot of details and he actually follows the science. But he talks about the rules and regulations that the administrative state have done and how this country cannot survive allowing these bureaucrats to come in and make all the decisions that the legislative branch has given up trying to do because they're a bunch of wusses that don't want to take a firm stand on anything and all they care about is getting reelected. So they turned it over to these administrators who are appointed in some cases. Some cases they're hired and they move through the ranks and they start making decisions that hurt us. They're biased. They're not part of the law. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting on how this is ruled in the Chevron deference case.
That is one of the ones that I am most looking forward to this summer because that changes everything. It really changes everything. It essentially it delegitimizes so many of those departments that we keep saying need to be gotten rid of. So I think this clears the way. Now I know that there's a certain former presidential candidate that you don't like very much, who I happen to think is great, that made some promises to go in and he actually expressed a plan to get rid of a lot of these departments. I'm still pulling for him to be vice president, y'all. Vivek Ramaswamy, that's my vote, but we'll see what happens.
It's not Vivek, it's Vivek. Rhymes with fake. So, if you're going to have him be vice president, I mean, we had this big issue with Kamala, pronouncing her name.
Oh, it's going to be all over.
We had a lot of problems when we were pronouncing her name wrong. So he made it very, very firm that it's Vivek, rhymes with cake and fake. And again, he said a lot, and I certainly know that he'd be a better vice president than the one we currently have.
I'm telling you, and this is my thing. Here's the deal: as get rid of as much of the government as possible, and you'll get my vote. If you promise to get rid of the government, then you got my vote. That's
one of the things that you'll see with this Supreme Court that's really, really important, and we saw it in the Dobbs case. And in the Dobbs case, they went back and they overturned Roe v. Wade. Okay. Now, some people were very happy with that. Some people were very sad with that.
Very mad.
But one of the things that happens with this Chevron case, and it's actually not the Chevron case, it goes back to these fishermen in New Jersey that are the ones that are the plaintiffs in this case and all of that.
That's right.
But what the fear is with all of them is this would overturn over 70 cases that has been ruled referencing the Chevron deference.
Oh my God. Do you have a list? Do you know which ones?
No.
Share them. Tell me. Where can I find it?
Well, Ericka, one of the real important things here is that neither one of us are lawyers, which really gives us an opportunity to tell the truth here. That we're not tied down to looking important and feeling important.
That's true.
So,
even though you look
not being lawyers, we don't have to get into the details of it, but we understand how the government works and how convoluted the law is. So
That's
they're
right.
really worried about, if this is overturned, can people go back and challenge some of the decisions that have been made since 1984 based on these rulings?
And you know that they're going to. Okay, this is the whole point. Is there's people are going to look for an opportunity. They're going to look for a lower court case that they can bring up through the ranks to make these changes.
Yes.
That's what a lot of times people do. You get asked a lot, especially as you're in your position as the RNC chair. I'm assuming people ask you a lot of questions about the government, and one of them would be, I would think about the importance of the Supreme Court and these rulings and precedents that are being set and things like that. Like, have you ever seen, do you remember a season? Sorry, I'm like, my brain is going a million miles a minute. Have you ever seen a season of the Supreme Court where it would be so consequential? There are so many consequential decisions being made.
No, one of the big things that's happening now is that they're not living on precedent. And so much of what has happened in the past is that easy route out is to say, these 9 people 30 years ago or 80 years ago or 120 years ago sat down and decided some things. It goes back to one of the simple things that everyone thinks is in the Constitution, the separation of church and state.
Yeah, that's not what it says.
That's one Supreme Court justice that made that statement. And suddenly that's a precedent for all kinds of things. So one of the things we're going to see here, when you talk about dismantling the federal government and making it smaller and less powerful and less intrusive into our lives,
yeah,
this is an important case, because if they can go back and look at these 70 cases, they can say the administrative state did this. It was not their responsibility. They did not have the authority to do that, and they have to overrule it. And when they start overruling all these cases where the administrative state made the decisions that the judicial branch should be making and need to make, instead of running away from their responsibilities, you're going to see a huge difference and a huge change.
Yeah. And that's the people often ask or wonder, why does the Supreme Court choose? Like, how do they choose which cases? How do the cases even get up to the Supreme Court? And a lot of times, especially with these Second Amendment cases, the abortion related cases, you'll have nonprofit legal teams scouring for lower court cases that they can support is it not the plaintiff, the defendant? The plaintiff. In
various cases, it's sometimes it's one or the other.
That's true, right? So they're basically like looking for cases that they can bring up to the Supreme Court to have precedent overturned or set, yes, even for that matter.
I want to close out before we go to break with one thing. The people that Donald Trump nominated and became justices of the Supreme Court, they are not afraid. And that is why so many precedents are going to be overturned, because they are not afraid. How many times in the Bible does it say, be not afraid?
That's right.
365.
You're made for such a time as this. Is it really?
Yes. Coincidence?
Wow.
I doubt it.
I doubt it. I doubt it. Well,
do you want to take us into the break?
Speaking of not being afraid, we've got the Israel Appreciation Day coming up in September. So let's hear Robert talking about it.
Why Israel Appreciation Day? Because no one is telling the Israel story about why Israel's existence is so important, not just as a Jewish state and not just as an ally of the United States, but for all the positive achievements Israel has contributed to the world in science, technology, medicine, human rights, religious freedoms, rule of law, democracy, and so on. We need to start winning the public relations information war and change the narrative, especially among our younger generations. We need to get the information out there and arm those people who understand the seminal importance of Israel to the world. And being the Jewish homeland doesn't begin to tell that story of why Israel is so important. It's something we all can come together on, and honestly, it's something we all must come together on. It is imperative the general public understands the nature of the very special relationship between Israel and the United States and Israel's importance to the world. So please join us on September 18th in Washington, D.C. as we celebrate Israel Appreciation Day. You'll also be able to find us live on all the streaming channels, including Roku, Apple TV, Dish Network, and others. Because never again is now.
You know, it's good to be back. I want to say a little bit about Israel Appreciation Day. You know, the things that ASIC and Robert Chernin, and specifically Robert, is doing to talk about what the relationship is between the United States and Israel. That's very, very important. So if you get a chance, go check out Israel Appreciation Day. It's on Twitter. It's on the website. They have their own website. Check it out, because the value that we have with that alliance with Israel is so vital to world peace. It's important to scientific discoveries. It's really about having a democracy in the middle of a horrible, terrible part of the world. So check out Israel Appreciation Day. Robert is leading the way through ASIC and with the organization that he has behind him. And it's really, really important that we get behind Israel, because they need us as a friend and we need them as a partner. So let's get back a little bit to some of the Supreme Court things. One of the interesting ones that I found that they ruled on already is Alexander versus South Carolina State Committee.
Okay.
And it's about redistricting. And so one of the things in South Carolina is there's a district, I can't remember the district number, but it has always been Republican hands.
Okay.
Except for one blip for a couple of years when it fell out of Republican hands. And what happened is the case was brought up because they said what the South Carolina legislature decided to do was they were going to redistrict to make sure that Black Americans did not have a majority within that district, because it was leaning and going in that direction. So they brought this challenge saying that they were gerrymandering a district so that Blacks would not have a voice in Congress or have a majority in that district, because Black people traditionally voted for Democrats. And so they were saying, they were making this huge judgment call on it. So what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said the legislature can do whatever they want, because they based their decision not on race, but on partisanship. That the legislature has the authority to say, we're going to make sure this district isn't Democrat. That we're going to make all the districts in South Carolina majority Republican voters.
You can't do that.
Yes, you can.
What?
The state legislatures are responsible for redistricting every 10 years.
Right.
And so the Supreme Court said
census,
you can gerrymander and build districts based around partisanship. You cannot do it based around race, but you can do it based around partisanship. So the Supreme Court has basically said we can have all Democrats in one little area, or we can make the Democrats the minority in every district. So
I am okay. How did I miss this? How did I not hear about this case?
Well, what they did was they actually kicked the ball down the road a little bit, kicked the can down the road. And so this ruling will last through the next election, because basically they said, we're not going to overturn it. We're not going to overrule it. We're going to look at what the results are, but you can legislate districts based on partisanship, but
that's
not
crazy, Jay. I mean, that is literally, I mean, what is, okay, I don't understand. Why, okay. Why wouldn't it be illegal to gerrymander based on anything? What does it matter if it's race or political persuasion or, left-handedness? Why would it be anything other than by population and lines that make sense?
Well, they do it by population. So that a congressional district is about 700 plus thousand people. I mean, I live in Vermont, where we don't even deserve to have a congresswoman.
Yeah.
And of course, we certainly don't deserve to have the congresswoman that we have, who is to the left of Bernie Sanders and to the left of AOC and Cory Bush and all of those folks. But what they're saying is that it is up to the state legislatures to build equal representation within their districts. And they can do it on a partisan basis, but they cannot do it based on race.
Wait, you just said equal and partisan. That's
equal population. So what they're doing is, I think there's 5 congressional districts in South Carolina. So they take their state and they cut it into 5 pieces any way they want. That's the power of electing people to your local legislature.
Oh, is that where we're going with this? The power of local government?
Power of local government.
You know what? I will allow the segue. I will allow it, sir. I am for it. That is actually a really good point, because if you have a problem with the way things are, get involved in your local government. That's where you can make the most difference.
Yes, and let's talk about local government in another case before we get into some real juicy ones.
Ooh, okay.
In this particular case, is regarding whether or not it depends on your point of view, whether you're a liberal or whether you're a conservative or you believe in small government or not.
Okay.
So in Oregon, believe it or not, liberal Oregon,
yeah,
they made a ruling. The city, Grants Pass, Oregon, decided that they had too many homeless residents that were taking over the city.
Mm-hmm.
So they were taking over the city parks. They were sleeping in the parks. They were tenting in the parks. They were doing all the things.
Yeah.
And so they made it illegal for the homeless to sleep in parks.
Oh, yeah. This is what made way for it being constitutional to live in public, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the Supreme Court's going to rule on this issue in Grants Pass, Oregon. And the majority of the justices, the conservative justices, are very much talking about local control. And the fact is, they are saying that 9 Supreme Court justices in Washington, D.C. do not know better what the ordinances should be in a city of 40,000 people. So it'll be very interesting to see what their ruling is and how they come out on this, based upon giving the local governments more power and more control. Now,
I mean, that's a good point, Jay. Oh, I interrupted you. Finish.
So what the liberals are saying, quite simply, is that you are making criminals out of the homeless. That you are saying they are criminals because they're without a home. They're houseless.
Right. Yeah.
They're not homeless anymore. You can't use that term.
That's
but
right.
They're houseless or underhoused.
Mm-hmm.
Might be one of the
Housing
things.
challenged.
Yes. So one of the things they have all these rules and regulations for the homeless all over the country. Congress has made all of these rules and regulations. What they really should do is change it a little bit, because what's going on in DC, they should make a ruling against the homely and kick most of these people out of Congress. So if we change it from homeless to the people who are in an unfortunate situation, and those who are in a fortunate situation in DC, and just call them the homely, it's a whole different situation. So there's not a lot of homelessness in Congress, but there's a whole lot of homely.
That is, speaking of homely, just total side note, The Hill is a YouTube news outlet, if you will. And they recently fired one of their co-hosts, and there was a girl on there yesterday. I swear to God, poor Robbie, just a shout out to Robbie over at The Hill, dealing with these crazy leftist liberal co-hosts. I swear this young man must have he's not a Christian, but he's got to be touched with some of the Holy Spirit to be able to tolerate these people.
Wow. So I want to go back to the Oregon situation. So the officials, a lot of residents were complaining because people were sleeping, urinating, defecating outside in these parks.
That's right.
So 3 homeless residents challenged these ordinances in 2018, arguing that
paid for this. Go ahead. Go. Okay. Go ahead. I'll save my question.
Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you don't have any money. It just means that you prefer. Sometimes you prefer to not be tied down and being put in places that you don't want to be.
I'm sure there's an Elon Musk out there living on the street.
Right. So there are lawyers representing them, and they're asserting that the 8th Amendment in the case was appropriate because being poor is a status. So they decide that if you can get together with other people and call yourself something, you can be considered a status which protects you within the 8th Amendment.
Which, for those of you listening, the 8th Amendment is against cruel and unusual punishment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. What? So what? Not being allowed to live in a public park is cruel and unusual punishment?
Yes,
I don't get
because
it.
you are not allowed to defecate where you want to or sleep where you want to.
How dare you, bigot?
Yes. So.
Okay. That's as bad as the abortion excuse from RBG in the 70s. Depends on what your definition of the word is.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Anyway. Thank you, Mr. Clinton. So I know there's another case out there that's very important that you want to talk about. So why don't we talk a little bit about the domestic violence? I don't know if, when I read a little bit about it, I felt it was a little bit of a red flag situation. There's lots of movement towards red flag laws and all of that. But I think you have a little bit different take on it than I do. So do you want to talk about the Rahimi case?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There was another one. Lord Benjamin, can you look it up? It's similar to the Rahimi case, but it actually has a sympathetic defendant. Bruin. No, it wasn't Bruin. It's one that hasn't it might come up to the Supreme Court still. But it's basically, for anybody who's been watching me for any length of time, I have a criminal record related to, 20 years ago before I got sober. And as a result, I still am not allowed to have weapons. I'm not allowed to own guns, or lethal guns that shoot bullets, let's say. So the question at hand is not whether or not Rahimi is a sympathetic guy. It sounds to me, honestly, when reading the case, like he's probably a dirtbag. But the reality is if our constitutional rights come just from being born a human being, then the government, the United States government, does not have the right to take that away from me just because I did something 20 years ago. And the fact that there's no opportunity to restore those rights, there's no opportunity for restoration in a meaningful way, really means that these bans are unconstitutional, because I have the right to own a gun just for being born a human being. I have the right to self-defense. So I have a vested interest in this case going through, whether or not Rahimi is a dirtbag or not.
Well, he certainly is a dirtbag. It's pretty clear, he's a drug dealer. He threatened his girlfriend with a gun, said he was going to kill her. There's also a previous thing where he was making threats against another woman using guns and those kind of things. So there's a real challenge here, and I'm really surprised that this case was the one that was brought before the Supreme Court. And I think, it's going to be a test of the Bruin decision, which you probably know better than I do, and you can talk a little bit about that. But one of the cases here, and one of the things that's important, is that if you can go to the extreme and take this away from the conversation of the person that's bringing the case,
that's right, correct,
versus what the law is and what the Constitution of the United States is very, very clear upon, to not infringe. So I think that is something that is really important in these cases. And we'll talk a little bit more in terms of how that applies to the Donald Trump immunity case that's coming up. And how you have to take the people out of the situation and look at what the law is and how it pertains to the Constitution, rather than how it applies to any one single individual. And that's why it's really important in this Rahimi case that he is a dirtbag. Because we could easily argue with you, Ericka, that you served your time, you paid the price for any mistake that you made.
Yep.
And so we can be very sympathetic to your case and say, of course, Ericka's a great person. She should have a gun to protect herself and all of those kind of things. So you are not a good plaintiff in this case because we like you. And we may be making a decision based around personality and not our Constitution. And when you get cases that go to the Supreme Court, it's all about the law. It's all about the Constitution.
So Benjamin does it say the name of the case?
I'm not, I couldn't find it. I'm looking right now.
Okay. Ninth Circuit. I think this is it. The Ninth Circuit in Los Angeles. It was another one of the same thing, but with a more sympathetic person. So that's interesting, Jay. I didn't realize that they would purposely pick a not sympathetic defendant or whatever, because in order to prove the point. Like, that's surprising to me to hear.
Well, it is. And I think you're going to see a lot of these cases when you start overturning precedent and you're overturning what the people have done in the past. You want to make sure that it's really constitutional. Yeah. And I think that's why this, to me, is a very intriguing case, because I don't want this guy to have a gun. He should not, in my opinion, he shouldn't have a gun. There are certain people in this country that, put him in jail where he belongs.
He's not in jail. He should be.
Yes.
Anyway.
So I'm absolutely with you in terms of we need to have laws that apply to everyone, that we can't have selective enforcement. And I want to go back, when we come back from break, let's talk a little bit about the Trump immunity case. Let's talk a little bit about the January 6th defendants and all that applies to them, because it's really, really important that we separate the person from the law, and that no one's status is above and better than anyone else's.
You hear that, people? Consistency, consistency, consistency. And so let's hear from some other folks who are consistent, the American Center for Education and Knowledge.
America came into being based on a shared belief and a common set of values. Unlike other nations that were bound together based on common ancestry, race, or caste, we came into being based on a simple and shared set of ideals. That the power of government is based on the consent of the governed. That life, the freedom to live life on our own terms in our own way, free from government interference, and liberty, our most precious value, and the pursuit of happiness, which means we are free to pursue that which we choose, with the knowledge and courage to know that nothing is guaranteed to us in this life. Those values, America was founded on these basic inalienable rights. Freedom to pray to God in our own way. Freedom to think and speak freely without fear of punishment or harm. And freedom to gather in our places of worship and in our local taverns. And freedom to defend ourselves, our families, our homes, and our neighbors as we see fit. The American Center for Education and Knowledge is dedicated to protecting American exceptionalism anywhere and everywhere it is threatened. ASIC is a 501c3 and depends on your tax-deductible donations. Please help us continue our fight.
The
Well,
final
I appreciate, we're back.
segment.
I guess we're back from the break, Ericka, which is great.
Yes.
The man in charge, Ben in the background, letting us know that, the commercial break is over. And another great commercial, by the way.
Yes.
Actually go out and support our sponsors. And before I forget about it, support us. Those of you listening on the radio,
That's right.
call in, do whatever you need to do. Tell your neighbors, friends and neighbors, we're on. Listen to us live, really important. But it's also,
Yeah.
I see on the screen, for those who are watching on video, like, share, and subscribe. What does that
right.
mean?
So if you're watching on any social media, there's a little button with a thumbs up, there's a heart, something like that. So we say like it. So whatever that means on whatever platform you're watching, give us a 5-star review if you're watching or if you're listening into any of your podcast apps. Share it. You can share this video with your friends. Share the radio program with your friends. Tell people to listen and subscribe. That's just whatever platform you're watching or listening on, there's some option to make sure you can follow, subscribe, and it doesn't cost you a thing.
And be honest, go into the, what's it called when you make a comment section?
Comments. Yeah, comment
And say,
section.
I can't wait for Robert to get back. Who's this guy bumbling on and making funny faces and those kind of things? I mean, we've already got Ericka who's could bring a little comic relief to it. So be honest. But, if you want to see me back, maybe as a guest, maybe with Robert and Ericka together at some point, mention
Yes.
that. Click on
That's
that
right.
like button. Certainly let us know that
We
you're
love your
watching.
feedback.
Let us know what's good, what's bad. What's that, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's right.
So be very honest about it. And please let us know because it's really important because we're not going to get any better without your help.
That's right.
So if you've got a suggestion, if you like Ericka's hat or you don't like her hat, if you want to go back to, I remember Robert talking about the red lipstick, a little bit of orange lipstick. Maybe you want Robert to wear lipstick. I mean, let us know. Let us know how you feel about that.
We'll get him
whether
some
I should
blue
be wearing a
lipstick to
wig
match his
or
suit
cover up.
jacket. Yeah, dude.
If this head is glowing too much on you, and you've got an issue with that, join us, have some fun. What we're talking about are very, very serious issues, but we don't take ourselves seriously. Well, I don't.
Can't take yourself too seriously.
No, because people will laugh at me instead of laughing with us.
That's
So
right.
let's make sure we have a good time and we enjoy ourselves. But the
Amen.
exceptionalism that made America great takes our focus, takes our energy, and we need to talk about that as well. So one of the other cases that the Supreme Court is talking about, everyone's calling it the Trump immunity case.
Yeah, right. Okay,
So
I'm really looking forward to your commentary on this.
Well, one of the big things is whether or not he can stand trial on crimes that he committed while being president.
That's the substantial question at hand, right? Like that's ultimately what it is.
Well, going back to a little bit about what we talked about with the Rahimi case and
Yep.
the dirtbag that was there and how the Supreme Court is separating the person from the law.
Yep.
So the arguments pre-trial, during the trial itself, before the Supreme Court, what they were talking about are two different things. The liberal justices want to talk Trump, 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 Trump. The conservative justices who follow the
Law, science,
Constitution, science,
yes,
all of those kind of
all
things,
of the above.
want to take a look at the presidency and the separation of powers. So they want to talk about what the president's rights are and what the presidential's official acts are versus things that are not official acts. And where's the fine line there as to what falls into the category of presidential immunity and which doesn't? And one of the things that the conservative justices said over and over was we're not talking about President Trump here. What we're talking about is the office of the presidency.
Oh, wow.
And it's really important to get away from who the defendants are and the personalities involved and what your political viewpoints are, and break it down to what the Constitution is and what immunity is for the president. And this goes into a lot of different things, including top secret documents, all of those kind of things that are involved in what some people would consider a crime. This particular one is regarding January 6th and what his involvement was in what some people call a riot, some people call an insurrection. I've never seen an insurrection or an overthrow of the government without weapons, so I'm not really sure where anybody gets that concept.
Call me crazy. I'm pretty sure the only coup that happened that day was Mr. Milley and some of the generals, but that's a conversation for another show.
Okay. So what we're really trying to do is talk about this being bigger than Trump. This really is an important case going forward about immunity and what the president has the authority to do.
Okay.
And we already have in place the process of impeachment and conviction. So there's a belief among many of us that the process is that should the president do something wrong that is outside the scope of his responsibilities, that there's a process called impeachment. And what the Democrats was very clear about in this last go around after January 6th was they impeached the president of the United States after he was out of office.
That's right. Oh.
So there is a method, there is a solution of dealing with misconduct as a president. It's called impeachment and conviction. And I truly believe, and I believe that some of the justices will also confirm that if you impeach the president and he's convicted by the Senate, that then those crimes can allow for convictions in the justice system afterwards.
Okay. Like outside of the
outside of the process, because what they're saying is that the House has decided that they're impeachable offenses.
Yeah.
And the Senate is agreeing that he has done things that are crimes against the country. So then I believe you can prosecute a president. So that is not the case here.
Yeah, they didn't impeach him. They
did not impeach him. They did not find him guilty of any crimes.
Senate. Right.
So he's already been tried for this. So the reality is that he deserves to have immunity in these particular cases. So if we just look at the Trump part of this, he certainly should be immune from further prosecution because he's already been prosecuted for whatever crimes they say there are.
Well,
so in my opinion, what they need to decide on is what are official acts that the president can commit and do that are above and beyond the normal duties. So I don't know if I'm explaining that exactly.
Yeah, but that's what it basically has to be, something that's outside of what he does as being president. It has to be something unrelated to being president, which when you're president, what is unrelated to being president? He divested from his businesses, or not divested. That's not the right word, but basically like you have to do a thing for legal purposes, but like what is an example of that?
Well, one of the things they're trying to get him for is subversion of the 2020 election. So one of the things that we can talk about here is that they brought up situations like, what if he tried to do a coup?
Okay.
Is that within the realm of presidential responsibilities? And we go back to our Democratic former president, John F. Kennedy, who worked with the CIA to try to overthrow the Castro government in Cuba.
Right.
Does that mean that he should be prosecuted for crimes? Was that an act as a president, or was that an act as an individual looking to overthrow a foreign government, or was he acting on behalf of the United States government?
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
I mean, okay.
so there are a lot of things that you look at in terms of things that are impeachable offenses, perhaps,
Yeah.
versus crimes that are outside the system, outside,
Right.
because the real remedy is impeachment and conviction.
Well,
So,
and but I think, I mean, you say the real remedy is impeachment, but obviously that wasn't enough. They've just, love him or hate him, they have been looking for, they literally are prosecuting him for non-crimes at this point.
right.
And so even if you get in the realm of a crime, unfortunately, I think a lot of the American people are just not taking any of this stuff seriously anymore.
Yeah, the liberal justices are trying to say that if you give blanket immunity,
Okay.
it allows presidents while in office to commit any crime that they want.
Like war crimes or murder, or
Anything, because
other
you're giving
words that
blanket
we're not
immunity.
allowed to say on YouTube.
Right. But what Alito in particular is saying, that you're looking at a destabilization of democracy. Because let's say this very tight race that we had between Biden and Trump, we've already seen the weaponizing of the Justice Department against Donald Trump.
That's right.
So if there's no immunity at all, that allows the Justice Department to go after Trump for jaywalking. That allows him for, to be with other people and to pick every
Right.
crime that you can possibly think about.
Right.
And it's very, I'm trying to think of the word of it, but what really needs to happen here is that they need to come up with some type of system, maybe it's Congress or whatever, to talk about the scope of immunity. When will the president have immunity? I think it's very clear that there's no subversion of the 2020 election, and they're going to say that, there's no way they can prosecute him for that. But we do need to have some type of rules and regulations saying, he can't really just walk out and shoot a reporter in the Rose Garden. So there needs to be a definition of what.
That is so.
Immunity.
Yeah, and what are presidential duties? I mean, this is so fascinating, and this is going to prove, I think, a lot about our current Supreme Court and what we have going on. I cannot wait to see what Ketanji Brown Jackson says that she can't speak to because she doesn't have a degree in it, like this is. Here's my thought. I need to go pop some popcorn and get ready for the Supreme Court decisions to start rolling out this summer, because it's going to be fire. People are going to go crazy. There's going to be riots. Maybe I can't say that. YouTube, I'm speculating. I'm not saying people should go do that. I'm not promoting violence. I'm just saying that I feel like no matter, Jay, do you get the feeling like no matter what the outcome of the election is, that it's going to be a problem?
I believe there's going to be issues regardless. I think both sides, because the country's so evenly divided that half the people in the country are not going to be happy.
Yeah.
But I think it comes back. The one thing I want to go back to about the Supreme Court and how wonderful they are is they are not tied. They are not tied to precedent. Looking at things that is nonpartisan, that is really reflective of what their job is and what their responsibilities are. It's not how they feel. Feelings are nice in a romantic situation, but I don't want our Supreme Court people to be romantic with each other. I want them to follow the science, and I want them to follow the Constitution, and I want them to continue to be brave. And to say, just because you did it that way in the past doesn't mean that's the way it should be done in the future.
Yeah.
So America, support our support our members on the Supreme Court. This whole distraction with Alito and Thomas and all of that is they're trying to cancel them. It's part of their cancel culture, and they're going after the biggest dogs in the yard. So they need to be not afraid. They need to say, guess what? 70 cases are wrong, that they gave it to the administrative state, and they need to overrule the Chevron deference. Stand up, make this government work. Don't let it be run by unelected officials that think they're something special when they're not. The Constitution rules in this country, and our last leg of hope for this country is this Supreme Court. And let's support them each and every way that we possibly can. So that's my rant for the day.
I love it. I'm with it, Jay. I'm totally feeling it. I am curious, what do you think will be the most impactful of the cases that you've seen this year? You think it's going to be Chevron?
I believe it's going to be Chevron, because the other thing that, when you look at the Chevron case, it affects so many other parts of government. It really reinforces the separation of powers. It separates and gives the power back to the judiciary, but it also makes Congress live up to their responsibilities of writing laws and rules and regulations and not leaving it to other people to do. They need to step up and take responsibility and not just waffle and be wusses about it so that they get reelected. Just do your job, Congress, and we wouldn't have these issues, and you don't push it down to people that we did not vote for, we did not elect, and in many cases, we don't even like.
That's right. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the show for today. We have been so pleased to have Jay Shepard with us today, filling in for Robert Chernin. Robert will be back in a couple weeks after he takes a little break. I guess he thinks he deserves like vacations and stuff. I don't know why. I'm not in charge. I'm not the boss here. So like we said earlier, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you come check us out next week. And Jay, where can they follow you on Twitter?
I'm at Jay the Shepherd 1 on Twitter. You won't find me many other places. Usually if I'm not on Twitter, I'm at home in my basement, listening to music and following what's going on in this world.
I love it. And if you guys are not already following Jay the Shepherd 1, you absolutely have to. This guy is super funny, witty, and we love his takes. Jay, you are one in a million. I know we pick on you a lot, but it's because we love you, we respect you, and we think you're fabulous. So thank you for being...
greatly appreciate that. Thank you. And just one other thing before we go, if I have time.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that I spend half my time being witty, that I'm a half-wit, but we'll go on from there. It was great being with you, Ericka, and thank you for, getting me through this hour, and been in the back room. Thank you as well.
All right. See you next week, guys.